Hello everyone, this is Christine McKay. Welcome to this presentation on the importance of integrating green infrastructure into land development to provide clean water. Integrating green infrastructure at 3 scales into land development helps manage and mitigate non-point source and stormwater polluted runoff, the leading causes of water quality impairments. Green infrastructure is fundamental to and the foundation of clean water. We will begin with a brief review of water quality data from Georgia's most recent water quality report. We will explain how traditional land development practices cause water quality impairments, and we will show how green infrastructure mitigates these impacts through examples of how Georgia is moving forward with green infrastructure implementation. In addition to protecting water quality, green infrastructure provides communities with other valuable environmental, social, and economic benefits. As you watch the presentation, see how many co-benefits you can identify. Adopting a new approach to land development is not easy. However, there are many organizations and resources available to help. This map from Georgia's most recent water quality report shows Georgia's streams with impairments in red and good water quality in green. As you can see, water quality impairments are widespread. Because land use and land development impacts downstream water quality, communities across the state collectively determine whether Georgia's waters are clean, fishable, and swimmable. Georgia is a home rule state, and only local governments have the authority to determine land use and zone property. The report lists 11 impairments. The top 3 are pathogens, biological integrity, and oxygen depletion. Pathogens are organisms like bacteria that can cause disease in humans. Impaired biological integrity and oxygen depletion, taken together, indicate that the streams no longer support healthy aquatic life. The report identifies non-point source and urban runoff as the overriding source of impairments. How does non-point source pollution get to streams? How does runoff from our stormwater infrastructure affect streams? As seen in the diagram to the left, as land is developed, infiltration is reduced and runoff increases, carrying more non-point source pollutants to the nearest stream. Rainfall hitting our impervious surfaces quickly runs off into storm drains, and stormwater is delivered to the stream in large volumes through outfalls. On the right, the stormwater hydrograph shows that after land is developed, the dashed line, streams have high volume peaks and rapid discharges. Compare this to stream conditions prior to land development, the solid line. Pre-development streams have lower and less rapid peaks. Note that stream-based flows after development are much lower compared to pre-development based flows. Imperviousness prevents infiltration and groundwater is not recharged. Water supply is reduced. As imperviousness increases, streams have common characteristics called the urban stream syndrome. Water temperature, nutrients, toxics, suspended sediments are all higher. And with the high volumes of stormwater rapidly moving into streams, stream banks are entrenched. The stream no longer connects with its floodplain, and excessive sediment is sent downstream. As you may remember from the drought of the early 2000s or the flood of November 2009, water quality and quantity impacts the economy. Climate trends indicate that floods and droughts are going to become more frequent and severe. As land is developed, the footprint of urban flooding is constantly changing. Property damages due to floods are much worse when development is allowed in floodplains and wetlands, which in natural areas store excess rainfall. 10 people lost their life in the 2009 flood. Property damages to homes and businesses exceeded $193 million. Base flows in streams are lower in times of drought. American Rivers developed this graph to show that base flows were lower in 2000 to 2012 than in previous droughts. This reflects the impact of the expansion of Atlanta's airport, which is in the Flint River headwaters. Georgia has experienced tremendous population growth and urban sprawl. This slide shows the changes in housing density in Georgia from 1970 to 2000 and projections for 2030. Yes, Georgia is blessed with forests. However, as housing density increases within the forests, the homes, driveways, and even dirt roads do not allow infiltration. If Georgia develops land as it has in the past, with the housing density increase it predicted, will Georgia have any streams of clean water, any healthy aquatic life? What is green infrastructure? How does it reduce polluted runoff? How is it integrated into land development? Green infrastructure reduces polluted runoff by integrating natural processes into land development by conserving nature and/or using engineered systems that mimic nature to treat and manage stormwater through infiltration, evapotranspiration, or harvest and reuse. Let's take a closer look at the three scales of green infrastructure. At the landscape scale, local governments can inventory their green space and conserve a network of lands that naturally store and filter stormwater. Communities would conserve their floodplains, wetlands, stream buffers, and priority upland forests. While development occurs around them, these natural lands help anchor ecosystem services, providing clean water, air, and land. In neighborhoods, local governments can identify drainage hotspots and retrofit the land with green infrastructure to cleanse and infiltrate stormwater from several developed sites. At the site scale, when land is developed or redeveloped, green infrastructure keeps at least the first inch of rainfall on site, so there is no runoff. In Georgia, 85% of the storms precipitate less than an inch. Let's look at some examples of how Georgia is moving forward in its efforts to mitigate non-point source and stormwater runoff by implementing green infrastructure at these three scales. In 2014, in the face of anticipated land development, see the bottom right map showing housing density in 2000 versus 2030. A group of Georgia and South Carolina water utilities established the Savannah Clean Water Trust Fund. As shown in the graph, they recognized the fact that the cost of providing drinking water is considerably higher in watersheds with sprawling land development as compared to forested watersheds. They completed a natural resource inventory and prioritized land for conservation, including working forests, floodplains, and wetlands. Their goal is to purchase 8,000 acres a year through fee simple purchase or conservation easements. In June 2008, Decatur County, Georgia purchased over 8,400 acres to establish the Silver Lake Wildlife Management Area. Project financing included a loan from Georgia's Environmental Finance Authority's Clean Water State Revolving Fund. County voters agreed to a special purpose local option sales tax to repay the loan. In their neighborhoods, local governments can use neighborhood-scale green infrastructure to treat and clean stormwater drainage from several sites. Here we have two award-winning examples. When Sandy Springs developed its City Springs government complex, they decided to address a runoff hotspot that flowed into Marsh Creek. They combined an engineered bioretention best management practice with a retention pond. The native vegetation and specially designed soils in the bioretention cleans and treats the stormwater with its dirt, grease, and other pollutants that wash down during rainstorms. The water is then channeled into a wet pond where additional sediment can drop out and a fountain oxygenates the water, increasing the number of organisms that consume and break down contaminants. This neighborhood green infrastructure demonstration received financial support from Georgia's Nonpoint Source program. The green infrastructure was successful in improving water quality in Marsh Creek, and a Nonpoint Source success story can be found on EPA's Nonpoint Source website. I like the picture of Sandy Springs officials celebrating the completion of the park. The second example of neighborhood green infrastructure is the historic Fourth Ward Park. Atlanta was planning to address flooding and combined sewer overflows with a $40 million gray infrastructure storage tunnel. Neighborhood residents demanded another solution, and instead, the city spent $25 million to construct the historic Fourth Ward Park. As you can see in the picture to the far right, during storms, the volume of water in the pond increases, preventing flooding elsewhere. The project daylighted the headwaters of Clear Creek, remediated contaminated soils, added trees, and created a wetland bench around the pond. By 2016, private investors had spent over $500 million in redevelopment around the project. It is highly unlikely that this investment would have occurred around an underground storage tunnel. With new development and redevelopment, site-scale green infrastructure is incorporated into the site so that the first inch of rainfall is retained after the project is completed. This graph shows rainfall in my neighborhood. As you can see, in 2015, most storms had less than 1 inch of precipitation. Georgia Tech has developed a campus-wide stormwater master plan installing site-scale green infrastructure best management practices. In 2013, the Grand Hyatt Buckhead, a luxury hotel, installed cisterns so that they now use rainwater in their cooling towers instead of drinking water. The state of Georgia is a regional leader in the adoption of site-scale green infrastructure. Because of the harmful impacts of urban runoff, Municipal Separate Storm Sewer Systems, MS4s, have been federally regulated and require stormwater discharge permits. Over 3 or 4 permit cycles, Georgia worked with local governments to help prepare them for the adoption of green infrastructure at the site scale for new and redevelopment. As of December 20th, 2020, all of Georgia's stormwater permits require that at least the first inch of runoff be retained on site using green infrastructure best management practices. There are 57 Phase 1 and 109 Phase 2 communities now implementing green infrastructure at the site scale. Georgia's stormwater management manuals, one specifically for the coast, explain the importance, technical specifications, and operation and maintenance needs of green infrastructure best management practices. Unregulated local governments can voluntarily adopt site-scale retention regulations and develop a green infrastructure program to integrate green infrastructure at 3 scales into their land development. This is what the City of Atlanta did in 2013. Years prior to state regulations, the city adopted on-site retention requirements. In addition, they took an extraordinary step, requiring that new and redeveloped single-family housing also meet the 1-inch retention requirement. The city prepared straightforward guidance documents for single-family and commercial green infrastructure implementation. At the landscape scale, the city continues to work to strengthen green infrastructure connectivity as shown by the acquisition and expansion of the Blue Heron Nature Preserve. The city recently uploaded a detailed, visually appealing story map describing their green infrastructure program. Local governments that decide to develop green infrastructure programs have the benefit of learning from Atlanta's experience and accomplishments. Numerous co-benefits result when green infrastructure is adopted at 3 scales. There are reductions in water treatment costs, flooding, and the urban heat island. Air quality improves, and climate change is addressed as urban forest and landscape scale green infrastructure absorbs carbon dioxide. New approaches to land development face many barriers. Local governments have to decide if the long-term advantages of pursuing a green infrastructure program outweigh the short-term costs. Implementing on-site retention requirements, addressing neighborhood drainage hotspots, conserving natural lands, and not allowing land development in our floodplains, wetlands, and stream buffers requires leadership and public support. Will adopting green infrastructure at 3 scales be enough to provide clean water and healthy aquatic life in the future? More protection can be achieved by adopting development guidelines that require environmental site design and minimize imperviousness. Water is protected when we reduce pollution at its source. Local governments taking on this work are not alone. Many Georgia water resource professionals and organizations are leading the way, creatively working to address barriers and to achieve the benefits of green infrastructure adoption. At the top of this abbreviated list of organizations that provide technical assistance are state agencies. The Nonpoint Source program at the Environmental Protection Division funded its first green infrastructure demonstration project at the University of Georgia in Athens in 1999, 22 years ago. Since then, more than 35 green infrastructure demonstration projects have been completed. Active 319 projects totaling more than $5 million are currently underway. The EPA continues to provide technical assistance on green infrastructure. 3 new useful publications will be arriving shortly. Drawing from permit requirements from around the nation, the MS4 Green Infrastructure Compendium will provide examples of how green infrastructure is being implemented. Communities can reduce the source of much stormwater pollution by designing their streets differently. The new Green Streets Guide will help. In conclusion, Georgia has made significant progress in integrating green infrastructure into Nonpoint source and stormwater management. I hope that you will look for opportunities to support green infrastructure adoption at the site, neighborhood, and landscape scales. References and a list of Georgia Nonpoint Source 319 green infrastructure projects implemented between 1999 and 2018 are found on the following unnarrated slides.